I will build this world from love. I will build this world from love. Ya la 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 la, ya la la la. And you will build this world, and you will build this world from love. Ya la 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 la, ya la la la. And if we build this world from love, ya la 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 la, then God will build this world. Then God will build this world from love. Ya la 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 la, ya la la la. Olam chesed yibaneh, olam chesed yibaneh. Ya la 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 la, ya la la la. Olam chesed yibaneh. Ya la 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 la, la 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 la. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Temple Emanu-El, whether you're here in the sanctuary or joining us live streaming on our website. We are blessed to be here together in the safety of our sanctuary, praying for peace around the world, peace in our hearts on this Shabbat. And we're here with the incomparable cantor Marcia Addy, and we have Dan Zemmelman on keyboard, and Eric Schoen and Jonathan Ferris, who are going to be really bringing the Shabbat spirit in with us tonight. And before we light Shabbat candles, we'd like to offer a special wedding blessing. And so I'm going to invite Anne and Tim up here right now. And Anne is a member of our staff. And when is your wedding?
It's April 22nd.
It's very soon. It's in a couple weeks. And we are thrilled for the two of you, this beautiful simcha, this beautiful event in your lives. And we want to offer you a blessing of health and of happiness and being surrounded by love, being lifted up by your family and all of your friends in your community. And may the days of your lives be long, full of pleasure, full of joy, full of health, and full of happiness. And Cantor Addy is going to bless you with a beautiful short verse from Song of Songs. Dotili vanilo harue ashoshanim dotili rizotola min hamidbar mizotola min hamidbar dotili vanilo harue ashoshanim dotili among the flowers, my beloved. Among the flowers, your beloveds together. And thank you for all you give to our community, Anne. And may you have a beautiful wedding. And we'll see you on the other side when you're married. Thank you so much. And as we open up the gates of Shabbat with the Shabbat candles, I wanted to invite Isabella Serling and her family up. She will become bat mitzvah tomorrow morning. So we're going to invite you to light the Shabbat candles with all of us.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom. We continue on page 20 with Lecha Dodi, and just as we had our bride and our groom tonight, we think about the Shabbat as this beautiful bride in our lives, something that comes especially at difficult times. And it seems like there's a lot of difficult times in our world. And so when we have the opportunity to share music and share the rest, share the light of Shabbat, it's even more important for us. And so we sing these words of Lecha Dodi, celebrate the Shabbat bride together.
And we learned this from a synagogue in Jerusalem called Kol Hanshama, with every breath. This melody. Lecha dodi likrat kala, yalala, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, yalala, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, yalala, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ish me'or ha'bracha. Dodi likrat kala, yalala, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, yalala, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, hitoreri, hiva orech tubi uri, 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 shir daveri, kivod Adonai alaych nilach. Lecha dodi likrat kala, yalala, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, yalala, 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala, gam b'simcha ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, יללה, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, יללה, 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 בני שבת נקבלה.
Please be seated. We prepare for Shalom Aleichem on page 24. And This is a very big Shabbat. In fact, it's such a big Shabbat, it's known as Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Shabbat. And it is one of the special Shabbats. It leads us into Pesach. So it is the Shabbat that falls just before Passover. And so 1 week from tonight is the first Seder. And I always think it's interesting because for things like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, a lot of times it sneaks up on you if you're not looking at the right calendar, I guess. And it sneaks up on you and you aren't completely prepared spiritually, but especially for Yom Kippur, you don't need to prepare any food until the break fast, and so it feels like you didn't procrastinate. But with Passover, we really have time to prepare. And I think because there's so much involved in the preparation of food during Passover, most people are already thinking about where they're going and what they're preparing and what they're pulling out of their garage or their basement or calling for a recipe. And I think that's very important because it's not just a physical preparation, but it's a spiritual journey preparation. And so I want to encourage all of you to take this Shabbat HaGadol seriously this year and think about the fact that we're all on a spiritual journey. And think about, maybe you're here to pray, maybe you're here because it's your daughter's bat mitzvah tomorrow, and maybe you're here because you're with a friend who's saying Kaddish. But I want to give you a little taste of what it is to pray from Abraham Joshua Heschel. Rabbi Heschel says, the primary purpose of prayer is not to make requests. The primary purpose is to praise, to sing, to chant, because the essence of prayer is a song, and human beings cannot live without a song. And he says, prayer may not save us, but prayer can make us worthy of being saved. And so we think about that as we pray together, and we think about the angels that visit us, whatever that power is that we need for our spiritual vulnerabilities on Shabbat. And we turn to page 24 for Shalom Aleichem as we invite these angels into our midst.
I'm so glad you said angels, because I love doing this particular melody written by Rabbi Shefa Gold, because it really reminds me, I can feel the angels in this melody. In Hebrew, the word for angel is malach, and the plural is malachim, and you'll see it's the third word in this blessing. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch. And the angels actually have names. On my right, Michael. On my left, Gabriel, and before me, Uriel, and behind me, Raphael. Barchuni l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Before we turn to page 28 for the Baruch Hu, and when I had my eyes closed, I was thinking about, in the United States, people think of angels as, kind of like a Hallmark card with a harp or a little bow and arrow about love. But in the Tanakh, in the Jewish Bible, angels are powerful, essential spiritual beings that are full of force and strength. And so when we think about being blessed, it's not this la 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 angel. It's sometimes we need sometimes we need the force of Raphael. Raphael is the healer,
Yeah,
right?
and Gabriel, who is the strength, the strong angel.
Right.
And Uriel, the light, the angel that brings light.
And Michael.
And Michael, the one who is like God.
Yeah, and so that just that sense that sometimes you need something outside of yourself that's more powerful than you to bring you forward. And those are the angels, not the Hallmark ones, the ones from the Tanakh. So as we move forward to the Baruch Hu, we rise together on page 28.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vaed.
We turn to page 31 and we read together in the English, the top of the page. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars, creator of the tide of time and light. You guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, ha-ma'ariv aravim. Ahavat olam, everlasting love, is on page 32.
What a great love, great love. What a great love you have given us. What a great love, great love. What a great love you have given us. Let's try that together. What a great love, great love, what a great love you have given us. What a great love, what a great love you have given us. Achavat olam beit Yisrael, Achavat olam Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Please be seated and join us for the Ve'ahavta on the next page, 36.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתיכם מארץ מצרים, להיות להם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אלוהיכם אמת.
We continue on page 40, and we sing the song that really is so much a part of this spiritual path to Pesach, because the Michamocha is lifted right out of the Exodus story, and it is the moment in Exodus when our people are literally in between slavery and freedom. And so, what version are we doing?
We're
Little
doing
Pesach?
the one that you always ask for.
Oh, okay. I call it like the I call it like the shanty one, or the I love that one. Thank you.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, עושה מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה אלינו ואמרו, זה אלינו ואמרו. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, נורא תהילות, עושה פלא, נורא תהילות, מקיף אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
we continue with the blessing for healing, and a lot of people who continue to need healing right here in our own family, our Emanu-El community, in our country, in the world. We think with deep pain for the families who are suffering with loss and pain in Ukraine and who have left, the millions of people who are displaced and who need healing of their bodies and their souls, and especially with the violence in Israel that we're experiencing. We think about the prayers that reach out from this sanctuary and all over the world to the people who truly need them. And so we turn to page 43 for Let There Be Love.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms.
We take into our hearts the members of our own congregation who are in need of a Misha Beirach, Frank Friedman, Rusty Holden, Leni Tsena, Ellen Goldstone, Isabel Blumking, Dina Adler Margalit, Michael Schaffer, Teresa Francisco, Burton R. Jackson, Michael Sims, Gregory Cole, David Anderson, Josh Jensen, Rabbi Ellen Weinberg-Dreyfus, Lou Aronow, Maxwell Myers, Sarana Rishka Miller, and of course we wish Rabbi Beth and Rabbi Jonathan refuah shlema from COVID, that they'll be back with us healthy together very soon, and anybody who is suffering from COVID at this time. And also I'd like to invite anybody to say the name of someone.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms.
Continue in thinking about all the protection, the spiritual protection we can offer, the physical protection we can offer to the people around us who need it, and then when we need that spiritual and physical protection, and we sing the Hashkivenu, which asks for God's blessing to cover us with a blanket of shalom, and then to lift us up in the morning to life. It's on page 42, and if you're with somebody that you know and you feel loving, embracing feelings towards, you can put your arms around that person.
Hashkifenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkifenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Ushmor Seiteinu Uvoenu Lechaim u'shalom me'ata v'Adonai. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'amidenu shomreinu lechaim. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'amidenu shomreinu lechaim. Shalom, shalom, shalom.
We continue with the Amidah on page 46, and before we rise, I just want you to think about how many times during the day do you have uninterrupted silence to pray without having a beep or a ring or some reminder. So just to take this time, and when we get to the place of our silence, just to give yourself that awareness of how precious it is. So we rise together and we turn to page 46.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tekilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elokei avoteinu v'imotenu Elokei Avraham Elokei Yitzchak Elokei Yaakov, Elokei Sarah, Elokei Rivka, Elokei Rachel, Elokei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagipur v'Hanura, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imachot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניכם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Please take some time for your own personal meditation and then feel free to be seated.
I don't know if you had the pleasure of hearing what we call the Meshorerim, the singers during our prayers. You were talking about how prayer and song are so intimately tied up, and the three of you just totally uplifted me with your song during the prayers. So thank you.
You heard Meshorerim and I heard Malachim. Remember I said like the angels can be so powerful, but sometimes you need this the beauty of, it was really gorgeous just to hear that and to be lifted up by it. So thank you for being the singers and the angels.
And I'm going to do something that I didn't plan on, but I know you're just going to go with it. Just thinking about what's happening in Israel, let's turn to page 356, one of the beautiful songs written by Naomi Shemer about Jerusalem. Okay. Avir harim tzalul kayayin vereach oranim נישא ברוח הארבעים עם כל פעמונים ובתרדמת אילן ואבן שבויה בחלומה העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה חומה ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. I love the last line of the chorus. It says, Halo lechol shirayich ani kinor. To all of your songs, I am but a violin. Let's do the second to the last verse if you won't want to try to join me. אך בבואי היום לשיר לך ולך לקשור כתרים קטונתי מצעיר בנייך מאחרון המשוררים כי שמך צורבת השפתיים כנשיקת שרף אם אשכחך ירושלים אשר כולה זהב ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור כינור.
Tonight I want to dedicate my drash to somebody who had a profound impact on my life. And I think one of the reasons you might not have ever heard of her is because she was a woman, and she was probably the most profound voice of her generation as a Holocaust survivor. We know very much about Elie Wiesel's story. We don't know as much about Gerda Weissman-Klein's story. And I just wanted to dedicate my drash to her. She passed away this week, and when I was 10 years old, my mother went to my synagogue, and she met Gerda Weissman-Klein, and she brought back her memoir. It's called All But My Life, and she inscribed it to me, to Sydney with love, Gerda Weissman-Klein. And I was 10 years old when I read my first Holocaust memoir about a little girl who survived Auschwitz. And it changed my life forever. If you haven't read this book, please read this book. And I wondered if I would ever get a chance to meet her myself and to tell her what an impact she had on a 10-year-old little girl's life. Definitely it helped me think about anti-Semitism in a different way and what it would mean to fight anti-Semitism with my whole heart and soul. And I became a rabbi in many ways because of that. And then in 2001, our congregants, Ron and Barbara Kaufman, who were dear friends of Gerda Weissman Klein, they brought her to Temple Emanu-El. And I got to meet her in person, and I got to tell her her impact on my life. And I invited her to the late Shabbat, which is the service we're about to have at 8:30, all young adults. And there were 400 young adults where you were sitting in 2001. And I brought Gerda Weissman Klein onto the bima right here. And I asked people to raise their hands if they had never met a Holocaust survivor before, and over half of them had not met a Holocaust survivor. This was 20 years ago. And at the very end of her speaking, she pulled out this book, and she gave it to me. It had been published every single year. Same book, different color, all but my life. And she wrote in it, to Sydney, because you understand so well and care so very much, with deep gratitude and love, on a memorable day in 2001. When I think about if I had to leave my home or if I was in danger of the synagogue, what I would grab, it's these two books. And so I just want to, as we think about saying Kaddish for her tonight, if you've never heard of her, she won an Emmy. She won an Academy Award for her life story, Best Documentary. And she was awarded by President Barack Obama the Presidential Medal of Honor. She was really mamash someone and dedicated her entire life after she was liberated from Auschwitz to telling people her story. And she continued until just this past year. So that's Gerda Weissman Klein. I dedicate this drash to her. And you will also see that I brought my great-grandmother's pot to services as an honored guest. And this is not just my great-grandmother's pot, but it's my great-grandmother's gefilte fish pot. And I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but there's a story of a little boy who watches his mother preparing for Passover, and every year she does the same thing. Takes a huge brisket and cuts off one end of it and cuts off the other end of it and then puts it in the oven. And finally he says to his mom, "Why do we always cut off one end and the other in this recipe of yours and put it in the oven? Why is that so important?" And she said, "Well, we've always done it this way, called bubby." And so he calls his grandmother and he says, "We always cut off each end of the brisket and we put it in the oven. What recipe is that?" And she said, "It's not the recipe. In the old country, the oven was tiny." So I like to think about that story and think about the fact that when I grew up, I was so little when I first encountered this gefilte fish pot that I could climb inside of it. And it was a few years ago. And my great-grandmother made gefilte fish with my grandmother and with my mom, and I would watch them every year before Pesach. And I told the story of how this gefilte fish pot came over on the boat from Białystok, Poland. And I told it a couple times until that next Passover, my mom said, "This is your nanny's pot." And I said, "I know." And she said, "Your nanny was born in Chicago, Sydney." So I think I mixed up my one side of my family and my other side of my family, which is okay because our stories are so important, our ancestry is so important, but it's okay if you mixed up your Polish grandmother and your Chicago grandmother. But this actually was probably from Devon Avenue in Chicago. But for me, it is so symbolic of the transmission of recipes and of food and of tradition and of stories and what we call the Shalshelet Kabbalah, this incredible chain of transmission of tradition that each one of us is so blessed to have. And my mom would make the gefilte fish in this every year, and then if she came here, she would actually make the gefilte fish in Chicago, and she'd put the gefilte fish in a carry-on, and she would wheel it to San Francisco. Until one day, probably 10 years ago, I went to pick her up at the airport, and there was this huge tattered box that came on the United Carousel with her luggage. And I said, "What's in the box, Mom?" That box has traveled far, even though it was just from Chicago, because in this pot are all the stories of my ancestors and the stories of my family, and I want you to all think about how important those stories are as we move into this very intense period from slavery to freedom. And the Jewish holidays, the three big Jewish holidays, are called the Shlosh Regalim, the three pilgrimage. A regal is a foot, the 3 times when you are on a journey. And it was the physical journey that the Israelites made to Jerusalem during Sukkot and Pesach and Shavuot. And next Friday night, we will enter again, 3,000 years later, this journeying that we do together. And you know that there are people in Tel Aviv, there's people in Morocco, there's people in New Jersey, there's people all over the world. That same moment when the moon is completely full, because it's the 14th of the month of Nisan, it's a full moon, that will be arriving to the beginning of the Haggadah, the beginning of the Seder together. And so as I started our service thinking about how do we get prepared for that and not just going and getting the fish or the brisket, I wanted to bring our attention to a few things. One is the idea of the 4 children. Whether you have children or not, everybody once was a child. And so although in the Seder we point to 4 different children, the wise, the wicked, the simple, and the one who doesn't know what to ask, I like to think as we prepare for next week that at some point or another in our lives, we're all of those children. So if you think about a time when you felt very wise, very smart, or a time when you might have been naughty, wicked, you did something, you broke a law or a rule, a time when you felt you didn't get it, maybe you were too simple for the people around you. Most of all today, I feel like I don't know the questions to ask. Sometimes I'm just not sure because the world is upside down, and it's a painful place. And so I ask 4 different questions tonight for us to think about. One is, why is there so much suffering in the world in this moment? What can each one of us, what can we do about it together? How can I celebrate and feel joy, happiness, love in the midst of so much unrest, suffering, sadness in the world, in my own heart, in our families, in our communities all over the world? And then finally, unlike when I was little and I would watch and I would smell that smell that I didn't like so much, and I would hear the words, Bechol dor vador, in every generation, we have to actually feel what it was like to be enslaved. And I couldn't get it. I didn't know what I meant. I was in Highland Park. I was in like the hamlet of an upper middle class Jewish Chicago suburb. I didn't feel enslaved. It took me a little bit longer to figure out what that really means, which is that look around into other people's eyes and know their slavery is your own. And figure out what is inside of each one of us that's too narrow to express love or too narrow to lift up other people. And I also think about Dayenu. When we say the words Dayenu, when we sing and it's so joyful, I just think about, isn't it enough? Haven't we had enough? And I don't mean of the joy. We don't have enough joy and love and open-heartedness and healing. We need more of that. But Dayenu, isn't it enough with the suffering and the death and the war? And on Shabbat, we're supposed to say, Dayenu, it would have been enough. And we get Shabbat. We get this time when we actually are commanded to feel a little bit of joy. Finally, I want each person to bring something. If you are celebrating Pesach next Friday or Saturday or at any point during the 7 days, something new to your Seder plate. Some people bring an orange. Every year, you have the opportunity to bring something new. And this year, I learned about bringing a radish to the Seder plate. Why a radish? Not just for the bitter herb, but the word radical and eradicate come from the Latin word radix, which means root. It's also the root of the word radish, which happens to be a root. But it suggests that an idea or a person or a thing that is radical has to uproot, has to turn things upside down, has to look at things, discern them, analyze them, and say, this is not right. Where is my place to turn it back to the place it might be or could be in this world? And so I'm going to add a radish this year to our Seder plate so that we think about how radical Jews can be, should be, need to be, and want to be. Shabbat Shalom. We continue now as we move towards the Aleinu. We rise together on page 282.
לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר וחיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
Please be seated. Tonight we recall the names of our loved ones who live only now in our memories. Their shloshim, the first 30 days since they left us. Jerry Hirschman, Henry Berger, Marie Schneider, Ruth Rose Schuller, Izya Ogomolnik, Elisa Lynn Kaufman-Rubel, Geraldine Hirschman, Norman Bohr, Madeline Albright, Don Kahn, Robin Owen Bushby Wood, John Zwirling, Mark Kessler, Gerda Weissman-Klein, and Sharon Kaufman, as well as Eitan Gini and Tomer Morad, who were killed yesterday in the terrorist attacks in Tel Aviv. And the yahrzeits of these members of our community falling on this Shabbat: Sarah Bela Grossberg Altman, Ruth Barkin, Bella Barsman, David Beloff, Clarice May Barrelton, Esther Block, Saul Bourne, Goldie Cash, Maurice Eliezer, Don Felsen, Sidney Stephen Feinberg, Rose Kaufman Friedman, Cecilia Gartenberg, Bernard H. Gershik, Saul Greenstein, Ruth Grenitz, Bertha Albert Grossman, Harriet Grossman, Dorothy Jasper, Lillian Kopman, Helen Leeds, Rose Levin, Alan Lipset, Willard P. Livingston, Julius Fischel London, Elaine Magnan, Anne Lucille Markowitz Feinberg, Sadie Michael, Philip Moses, Saul Namyat, Fern Naxon, Rachel Olewski, Joseph Radlow, Rose Reed, David Rosehill, Joseph Ivan Rosenbaum, Aaron Rosenthal, Blanche Hellman Sachs, William Samuels, Irma Shire, Florence Schwartz, Emil Schwerin, Serena Seshi, Geraldine Sikular, Lillian Smith, Ethel Spiedick, Larry Sunshine, Sylvia Tannenberg, Robert Teitler, Steffi Tick, Theodore Wanko, Betsy Wilner, Cindy Wolf, Merton Alexander Yalis, and Rabbi Irving Hausman, who served this congregation from 1964 to 1967. If there's anyone else who is observing the yahrzeit or has lost someone recently, please feel free to say that person's name. And I invite all of the mourners to first rise, and then the rest of the congregation to rise. And we turn together to page 294 as we remember them with the Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba, ve'almad yivrach hirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayachon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mivorach le'olam almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yithalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha barichu, leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, za'miran be'elma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Oh, say shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'yakol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oh, say shalom bimromav.
Number 5.
I saw your lips, Isabel. You said, oh my God. We're all going to sing it with you. It's a community blessing. We're here to love you and support you and sing it together. Come up here. Come up with us. Even worse. Baruch atah Adonai. Let's sing with her.
Eloheinu melech haolam, borei bari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, v'ahava uratzon, chinchilanu. Zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techilat, nukarenu desh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim, ki vanu v'charta, v'tovanu kiddasha, mikol Shabbat kodsha, ve'ava uratzon, hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai,
And you sing that so beautifully.
L'chaim.
Yesher koach.
So before we join in the motzi, two quick things. One is, I found it fascinating that a congregant shared with me that a lot of her non-Jewish friends and neighbors called her and said this year, "You're not going to believe it. I did 23andMe, and I'm like 3% Jewish. Can we come to your Seder?" Which is interesting because it's like if you find out you're 3% Neanderthal, you have nowhere to go, right? But I loved that. And unlike when non-Jews say, well, I'm having my own Seder, or they want to put a menorah, a Hanukkah on their window, I love the idea of bringing non-Jews to our Seders because I think it also dispels anti-Semitism and it gives people a place at the table to learn about us. And before we do motzi, I want to say that one of my teachers, Rabbi Eugene Borowitz, taught me in the face of all of the stuff that we're dealing with right now. He used to take the subway from the seminary back home every day, and he would sit in the crush of humanity. This is way before COVID, just surrounded by people, and there was no room, and all he could do was look around from face to face. And so what he did, and you can imagine what it's like in a New York subway, everybody's on there, and he would look every single person in the eye, and he would say to himself, created in the image of God. B'Tselem Elohim, created in the image of God, 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 created in the image of God. And then he would get home. And I just think if we all could look into each other's faces, it doesn't matter what your gender is or your color or your religion, it doesn't matter where you are. If we look into each other's eyes and say created in the image of something that is divine, maybe the world will change. So let's join for the motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon.
Please bring your sidurim back and Shabbat Shalom.
Oh, say shalom b'roma, Uya say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Hey!
Hey!